Hey man, when a woman goes no contact for months, the instinctive reaction in most men is panic. Disguised as strategy, they start counting days, replaying conversations, wondering if silence means she's healing, manipulating, or forgetting them entirely. And that mental spiral is exactly why no contact hurts men far more than it hurts women. Because men interpret silence as loss, while women often use silence as control, reset, or emotional recalibration. The truth is, if she's doing no contact for months, the worst thing you can do is resist it. The best thing you can do is let her completely, without protest, without explanation, without trying to reclaim relevance. No contact isn't a negotiation. It's not a pause button you're supposed to wait beside. It's not a test you're meant to pass by proving loyalty through suffering. It is separation. And separation reveals truth faster than communication ever will. When she chooses silence, she's choosing distance from your emotional presence. And any attempt to force closeness during that time doesn't create attraction. It confirms weakness. It tells her that your emotional stability depends on access to her. And that realization quietly kills respect. Men make the mistake of treating no contact like a battlefield strategy. If I wait long enough, she'll miss me. But no contact isn't about timing. It's about power. Whoever is least disturbed by silence holds the psychological advantage. And when you spend months emotionally frozen waiting for her to break it, you surrender your power entirely. You turn her absence into the center of your life, and nothing is more unattractive than being the emotional placeholder in someone else's decision process. If she's doing no contact for months, it means one of two things. Either she's trying to detach emotionally, or she's waiting to see if you detach first. In both cases, chasing, checking in, or just seeing how she's doing works against you, because it tells her you are still orbiting her while she is moving freely, and attraction does not flow toward men who remain stuck in emotional suspension. Silence is not empty. Silence is information. When a woman chooses prolonged no contact, she is showing you without words where you stand. And the hardest truth men avoid is this: if she wanted to talk to you, she would. No contact isn't confusion, it's clarity. And clarity is painful only when it contradicts hope. Most men believe letting her go, no contact, means giving up. In reality, it's the only move that preserves dignity. When you stop trying to reinsert yourself into her emotional world, you remove pressure. And pressure is the very thing that makes silence permanent. Letting her go silent without reaction communicates something rare: emotional self-containment. It tells her you are not begging for relevance. You're not chasing closure. You're not collapsing just because she stepped away. Here's what almost no one tells you. No contact is not designed to bring her back. It's designed to reveal whether she ever belonged in your life to begin with. If months pass and she never reaches out, that wasn't a delay. That was a decision. And the sooner you accept that, the faster you reclaim your footing. Men who cling to maybe waste years. Men who accept reality early rebuild faster. When you let her do no contact without resistance, something important happens internally. Your nervous system recalibrates. Your mind stops scanning for signs. Your self-worth slowly detaches from her response. And that detachment, real detachment, not performative silence, is the only state from which attraction could ever return. Not because you waited correctly, but because you stopped needing the outcome. Women feel when a man is waiting, even in silence, especially in silence. Emotional attachment doesn't disappear just because words stop. And if she senses that you're still paused, still hoping, still emotionally present in the background, the silence continues because she knows she can return whenever she wants. Letting her go, no contact fully means removing that safety net. It means continuing your life as if she may never return. And paradoxically, that's the only condition under which she ever might. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Not as a tactic, not as a game. Let her. Because your life cannot be built around someone else's absence. Let her. Because your value does not decrease in silence. Let her. Because chasing clarity from someone who chose distance only teaches them that distance controls you. And the moment you stop being controlled by silence is the moment you begin to regain yourself. The hardest part of letting her go, no contact, isn't the silence itself. It's the ego withdrawal. It's the sudden realization that you are no longer influencing her emotional state, no longer shaping her thoughts, no longer relevant in the way you once were. And for many men, that loss of influence feels like a loss of identity. But here's the reality. Most men refuse to confront. If your sense of worth collapses when a woman removes access, then you are never standing on solid ground. To begin with, no contact exposes dependency, and exposure is painful, but it's also corrective. When months pass and she maintains silence, men often convince themselves that persistence equals strength, that reaching out one last time shows maturity or courage. But courage isn't expressed through emotional trespassing. Courage is restraint. Courage is allowing someone to live with the consequences of their choices without trying to soften the impact for them. When she chose distance, she chose to live without your emotional presence. Respecting that decision, even when it hurts, is the only response that preserves self-respect. No contact flips the power dynamic in ways most men don't understand. While you're tempted to see silence as her having control, the truth is, control only exists if you surrender your internal state to her behavior. The moment you stop monitoring the silence, stop assigning meaning to it, stop checking for signs, the power equalizes, and once the power equalizes, clarity replaces obsession. You stop asking, "What does this mean?" and start asking, "What do I need to rebuild?" Men often imagine that if they just hold on long enough, she'll eventually realize their value. But value that must be realized through absence was never fully valued. In presence, no contact doesn't magically awaken appreciation. It tests whether attraction exists without reinforcement. And if it doesn't, then the silence isn't punishment. It's confirmation. Confirmation that your effort was one-sided. Confirmation that your presence was convenient, not essential. Letting her go. No contact also forces you to confront something uncomfortable, the fantasy of reconciliation. As long as you believe silence is temporary, by default, you delay acceptance, and delayed acceptance keeps you emotionally frozen. You don't move forward, you don't heal, you don't rebuild, you stay paused, waiting for a future that may never arrive. Letting her go means releasing the fantasy entirely, not replacing it with bitterness, but with reality. Here's what rarely gets said. Many women use extended no contact as a way to reset their emotional leverage. They step away, explore options, regain independence, and observe from a distance whether you remain available. If you do, if you stay emotionally accessible without her investing anything, you confirm that she can return whenever she wants without cost. Letting her go, no contact, fully removes that leverage. It forces her to experience your absence as final, not provisional. And when she experiences your absence as final, one of two things happens. Either she accepts it and moves on, revealing that the connection had already ended long before the silence began. Or she feels the weight of the decision and reaches out, not because you waited correctly, but because you reclaimed your autonomy. Both outcomes are wins. What is not a win is staying emotionally parked outside someone else's closed door. Men who truly let go during no contact don't announce it. They don't make statements. They don't post indirect messages or update their life to provoke reaction. They simply withdraw emotionally and redirect energy into their own structure, work, discipline, health direction. And this redirection does something critical. It teaches your nervous system that survival does not depend on her return. Once your body believes that the obsession breaks, no contact feels unbearable. When your life lacks forward motion, when there is no mission, no momentum, no self-respect anchored in action, silence becomes deafening. But when your days are filled with effort, growth, and purpose, silence becomes background noise. Letting her go is not an emotional decision, it's a structural one. You build a life where her absence no longer defines the room. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Not because it's noble, not because it's strategic, but because your life cannot be paused indefinitely for someone else's uncertainty. Let her. Because waiting teaches you nothing except how to suffer quietly. Let her. Because the moment you stop orbiting her, silence is the moment you step back into your own gravity. And a man with gravity never begs for presence. He becomes impossible to ignore. What men struggle with most during prolonged no contact is not the loss of the woman, it's the loss of certainty. When communication stops, the mind fills the silence with imagined outcomes, imagined rivals, imagined futures where you were replaced, forgotten, or downgraded. And that mental noise drains more energy than any argument ever could. Letting her go no contact means refusing to feed that noise. It means recognizing that speculation is a form of self-harm. You don't regain power by guessing what she's doing. You regain power by refusing to let your mind live, rentre, in someone else's unknown. Extended silence forces a confrontation with truth. That conversation often delays. When someone removes themselves for months, they are telling you through behavior that your presence is not currently a priority. That doesn't mean you're worthless. It means alignment is absent, and alignment cannot be negotiated back into existence through effort or patience. Letting her go. No contact is not surrender. It is acceptance, and acceptance is the doorway to clarity. Men often confuse dignity with endurance. They think suffering quietly while waiting makes them noble. But dignity is not about how long you can tolerate neglect. It's about how quickly you respond to reality. The man who lets go early does not harden into bitterness. He softens into wisdom. He stops asking, "How do I get her back?" and starts asking, "Why am I willing to pause my life for someone who paused me?" There is a subtle but crucial difference between respecting no contact and orbiting it. Respecting it means continuing your life without reference to her silence. Orbiting it means structuring your days around the possibility of her return. One restores self-respect, the other erodes it. Letting her go, no contact fully means removing her from the center of your internal narrative. She becomes a chapter that closed, not a cliffhanger. You reread every night. Extended no contact often exposes an uncomfortable truth. Many connections survive only on momentum. Once that momentum stops, once messages end, routines break, and emotional reinforcement disappears, there is nothing left to sustain the bond. Letting her go means allowing that reality to reveal itself without resistance. You don't prop up what cannot stand on its own. Men who let go cleanly during no contact often discover something unexpected. Relief not immediately, but gradually. Relief from emotional vigilance. Relief from constant self-questing. Relief from performing stability while internally unraveling. That relief is not indifference. It is nervous system recovery. It is your body learning that peace does not require her validation. If she returns after months of silence, the man who truly let go will meet. That return from a place of choice, not hunger. He won't rush to repair. He won't demand explanations. He won't pretend nothing happened. He will observe. He will assess. He will decide. And that is the only position from which reconciliation has any chance of being healthy. Reconnection without autonomy is just delayed collapse. And if she never returns, the man who let go will still win. Because he did not spend those months shrinking, pleading, or waiting. He used them to rebuild structure where attachment once lived. He replaced obsession with discipline, rumination with action, fantasy with forward motion. And when life moves forward, absence loses its grip. No contact teaches a man how he relates to loss. Whether he chases it, avoids it, romanticizes it, or integrates it. Letting her go is not about being strong for her. It's about being honest with yourself. Honest about what you deserve. Honest about what you tolerated. Honest about what you will never accept again. So, if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Not because she deserves your patience, but because you deserve your peace. Let her because nothing grows in emotional limbo. Let her because silence is not something to fight. It's something to listen to. And when you finally listen without resistance, you don't lose her. You regain yourself. There is a moment during prolonged no contact where the pain shifts from sharp to dull, from urgent to heavy. And that moment is critical. That's when most men make their biggest mistake, mistaking emotional numbness for healing and rushing to reopen a door that was never meant to be forced. But numbness is not resolution. It's a signal that your nervous system is recalibrating after dependency. Letting her go means allowing that recalibration to finish, instead of interrupting it with hope, disguised as courage. Because every time you reach out prematurely, you restart the withdrawal, you reset the clock, you tell your body it still needs her to feel whole. Men often underestimate how much prolonged no contact exposes patterns that conversation always hides. When words are gone, behavior becomes undeniable. You see who initiates, who invests, who remembers, who replaces, and the truth revealed by months of silence is often uncomfortable. Many relationships survive only because one person keeps carrying the emotional load. Letting her go no contact is the act of putting that weight down. And when you put it down, you finally feel how heavy it always was. Silence also forces you to confront how much of your identity became relational instead of directional. When she disappears, what disappears with her? Your motivation, your confidence, your sense of meaning. If so, the silence is not the enemy, it's the mirror. Letting her go means using that mirror honestly, not to shame yourself, but to rebuild the parts of you that were outsourced to validation, intimacy, and emotional access. Extended. No contact reveals another harsh reality. Men resist. Attraction cannot be maintained by availability alone. When she steps away for months, she is not testing loyalty. She is testing whether her absence destabilizes you. And if it does, that instability confirms what she already suspected. Letting her go is the only way to reverse that signal, not by trying to impress her later, but by becoming someone who does not collapse in absence. There is also a deep lesson in learning to sit with unanswered questions. Men are wired to solve problems, to close loops, to restore order. No contact denies all of that. It offers no resolution, no clarity, no narrative closure. Letting her go means accepting that not every chapter ends with understanding. Some end with silence. And maturity is learning to walk forward without answers instead of standing still demanding them. When you truly let go during no contact, your perception of time changes. Days stop revolving around how long it's been. Weeks stop feeling like countdowns. Months stop carrying emotional weight. Time returns to being something you use, not something you endure. And that shift is powerful because a man who uses time well cannot be controlled by waiting. Men who break no contact repeatedly often tell themselves they are acting from authenticity. But authenticity without self-respect is just emotional exposure. Letting her go means recognizing that some emotions are meant to be processed privately, not delivered to someone who chose distance. Silence in this case is not suppression, it's containment. And containment is strength. There is a quiet confidence that develops when you stop needing someone to come back in order to feel validated. It doesn't show up as arrogance. It shows up as calm, as patience, as reduced urgency. And women feel that calm even if they never return. Because calm is the opposite of desperation, and desperation is what extended, no contact is designed to reveal. If she returns after months and finds you unchanged, still waiting, still hopeful, still emotionally available on demand, the dynamic resumes as exactly where it broke. But if she returns and finds a man who continued building, continued living, continued becoming without her, the dynamic is entirely different. Not because you planned it, but because you let go fully, and only from full detachment can any interaction be real again. So letting her go. No contact is not about punishment, pride, or posturing. It is about refusing to let absence hollow you out. It is about choosing growth over rumination, action over waiting, self-respect over longing. And when you do that long enough, something fundamental shifts. Silence stops feeling like rejection and starts feeling like space. Space to rebuild space, to realign space, to move forward without dragging the past behind you. One of the most brutal realizations that emerges during long no contact is this: you cannot reason someone back into desire. Men cling to the belief that if they could just say the right thing, explain themselves clearly enough, or show enough emotional growth, the silence would break. But desire doesn't respond to arguments, apologies, or self-improvement speeches. Desire responds to distance, self-possession, and the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needs to be heard to know who he is. Letting her go means abandoning the fantasy that clarity comes from conversation. Sometimes clarity only comes from absence. Months of no contact strip away illusions faster than any confrontation ever could. When someone removes themselves completely, you are forced to look at the relationship without the emotional anesthesia of daily interaction. You see what was real and what was imagined. You see how much you tolerated, how much you rationalized, how often you compromised your intuition just to keep the connection alive. Letting her go is not about losing her. It's about losing the lies you told yourself to avoid facing misalignment. There is a hidden danger in waiting that most men don't recognize. Waiting trains the mind to accept powerlessness, day after day of hoping without acting conditions you to believe. Your fate depends on someone else's decision, and once that belief takes root, It spreads beyond the relationship, into your work, your confidence, your ambition. Letting her go breaks that conditioning. It reattaches you. That movement, not permission, is how men reclaim agency. No contact for months also exposes whether you were in love with the woman or addicted to the emotional stimulation she provided. When she disappears, what do you miss more? The connection itself or the way it made you feel about yourself? The attention, the validation, the sense of being chosen. Letting her go forces you to separate love from dependency. And that separation is painful, but necessary if you ever want a relationship that doesn't consume you from the inside. Men often fear that letting her go means she'll forget them. But forgetting is not the real danger. The real danger is becoming forgettable to yourself, losing your routines, losing your standards, losing your forward motion, because your emotional energy is trapped in a past that is no longer responding. Letting her go is how you protect your own continuity. It's how you ensure that your life keeps unfolding, whether she is watching or not. There is also a quiet dignity in accepting that someone chose distance and honoring that choice without protest, not out of weakness, but out of self-respect. You are not required to fight for someone who stepped away. You are not obligated to chase silence, and you are not less of a man for refusing to beg for relevance. Letting her go means trusting that what belongs in your life will not require you to abandon yourself, to keep it. When months pass and no contact holds, something else becomes clear. Emotional closure is an internal process, not a mutual agreement. You do not need her explanation to move on. You do not need her apology to heal. You do not need her acknowledgement to rebuild. Letting her go means reclaiming closure is something you give yourself, not something you wait to receive. Men who survive prolonged no contact with integrity often come out changed in a way that is difficult to describe, but easy to feel. They become less reactive, less needy, less willing to overinvest. Without reciprocity, they stop romanticizing inconsistency. They stop confusing emotional intensity with connection. And this change does not make them colder. It makes them clearer. Clear about what they want, clear about what they won't tolerate, clear about who they are, without anyone else's reflection. If she ever returns after months of silence, the man who let go fully will not feel the rush he once imagined. He won't feel saved. He won't feel completed. He will feel calm, curious, grounded. And that calm is the real test of growth, because it means her return no longer defines your emotional state. You can choose instead of react. You can engage without surrendering. And that is the only position from which a second chapter could ever be healthy. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Not because you're indifferent, not because you've given up, but because you refuse to let your life be dictated by silence. Let her, because waiting without movement erodes men from the inside. Let her, because your future deserves your full attention, not your leftover hope. And when you finally stop orienting yourself around her absence, you don't just move on from her, you move back into yourself. There comes a point in prolonged no contact where the question stops being, will she come back? And quietly becomes, who am I becoming while I wait? And that question is the fork in the road. Most men never notice, because waiting feels passive, harmless, even loyal. But over time, waiting reshapes you. It teaches your mind to live in anticipation instead of intention. It trains your emotions to respond instead of lead. Letting her go is not just about ending the wait. It's about refusing to let your identity be sculpted by someone else's indecision. A man who keeps moving forward does not calcify around absence. A man who waits does. Months of no contact also reveal how much energy you are pouring into managing perception instead of building substance. When she's gone, there's no one to impress, reassure, or perform for. And that emptiness can feel terrifying until you realize it's also liberating. Letting her go means redirecting that energy back into places that compound over time. Discipline, skill, health, structure, purpose. Things that don't disappear when someone stops responding. Things that don't ghost you. Things that stay. Men often underestimate how corrosive hope can be when it's not grounded in action. Hope without movement becomes fantasy. Fantasy becomes paralysis, and paralysis quietly erodes self-rust. You stop believing in your ability to create outcomes because you've outsourced outcomes to someone else's return. Letting her go breaks that loop. It forces you to act without guarantees. And acting without guarantees is the foundation of masculine confidence. There is also a harsh truth. No contact brings to the surface. If someone can remove themselves from your life for months without consequence, then the relationship was not anchored in mutual necessity. It was sustained by your availability. Letting her go means accepting that imbalance without self-loathing. It means learning from it. And learning from it means never placing yourself in a position again where your absence has no weight. Men who truly let go during extended no contact often report an unexpected shift in how they experience attraction afterward. They become slower, more discerning, less willing to rush intimacy, less impressed by words, more attentive to consistency. And this shift isn't bitterness, it's calibration. Silence recalibrates your standards if you let it. It teaches you to value reciprocity over potential, presence over promises, action over intention. Letting her go also dismantles the illusion that closure must come from the other person. Closure is not a conversation, it's a conclusion. And conclusions don't require consensus, they require courage. The courage to say this ended when effort became one-sided, and to walk forward without dragging unanswered questions behind you like chains. Men who wait for closure stay stuck. Men who claim it move on. Extended no contact is often the first time a man realizes how much emotional labor he was performing just to keep something alive. Remembering dates, initiating conversations, repairing tension, reassuring insecurity, carrying momentum. When all of that stops, the imbalance becomes obvious. Letting her go is not abandoning love. It's refusing to continue unpaid emotional labor for someone who opted out. There is also something deeply grounding about accepting finality without resentment. Not everyone who leaves is a villain. Not every ending requires a trial. Sometimes people step away because alignment was never stable. Letting her go means releasing the need to assign blame so you can reclaim clarity. Clarity doesn't shout, it settles. And once it settles, the emotional noise fades. Men who let go properly during no contact don't emerge numb. They emerge precise. They know what they want. They know what they won't chase. They know what silence means, and they don't romanticize absence anymore. They don't confuse distance with mystery. They recognize distance for what it is: space. Someone chose to create, and choice deserves respect, not pursuit. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Not because time will fix everything, but because time will reveal everything. Let her. Because your growth should not be conditional on her return. Let her. Because the man you become while you stop waiting will be stronger, clearer, and far more grounded than the man who stayed frozen in hope. And that man, regardless of who comes back or doesn't, will never again lose himself in silence. At some point during extended no contact, a man reaches a quiet crossroads where emotion stops screaming and starts whispering. The intensity fades, but the meaning deepens. This is where most men either regress or evolve. Regression looks like reopening wounds just to feel something familiar. Evolution looks like allowing the silence to finish its work. Letting her go means trusting that discomfort has a purpose beyond punishment, that it is stripping away illusions you once needed to survive. When you stop trying to escape the silence, it stops chasing you. There is a hidden strength in accepting that some people exit your life without ceremony. No explanation, no apology, no closure. And while the ego demands narrative justice, maturity accepts reality as it is. Letting her go during no contact is choosing truth over story. It is refusing to decorate absence with meaning it never earned. Silence does not always hide complexity. Sometimes it simply reflects disinterest, and acknowledging that without self-destruction is emotional strength, extended. No contact teaches a man how to be alone without becoming lonely. There is a difference. Loneliness is dependence unmet. Solitude is self-containment discovered. When you let her go fully, you stop scanning the world for replacement validation. You stop seeking distraction. Through novelty, you learn how to sit with yourself without judgment, and that ability to be alone without feeling diminished is the foundation of unshakable confidence. Men often underestimate how much of their emotional suffering comes not from loss, but from resistance to loss. Fighting reality drains energy. Accepting it redirects energy. Letting her go means releasing the internal argument with what already happened. It means stopping the mental appeals court. Once you drop the case, you are free to move forward without dragging the past like evidence. You keep re-examining. No contact for months exposes whether you are loving her or escaping yourself through her. When she's gone, the void becomes obvious, and that void is not hers to fill. Letting her go means turning inward and asking hard questions about your direction, your discipline, your dissatisfaction. The answers may be uncomfortable, but they are empowering because they return responsibility to where it belongs. There is a strange peace that arrives when you finally accept that someone may never come back. Not despair, peace, because uncertainty ends. The mind stops rehearsing futures. The heart stops bracing for surprises. Letting her go collapses the probability wave, and once it collapses, you can commit fully to the present instead of hovering between hope and fear. Men who survive prolonged no contact without chasing often develop a sharper intuition. They become better at reading behavior. Instead of believing promises, they stop romanticizing potential. They stop interpreting mixed signals as mystery. Silence trains discernment. If you allow it, to letting her go is how you sharpen that edge without turning it into bitterness. This period also reveals which friendships, routines, and habits were neglected while your attention was consumed by the relationship. Letting her go creates space to repair those foundations, and repairing foundations is masculine work. It is slow, uncelebrated compounding, but it restores balance in a way emotional reassurance never could. If she returns after months of no contact, the man who truly let go will not feel urgency. He will feel assessment. He will not rush to recreate what was lost. He will observe whether effort is mutual, whether alignment exists, whether respect is present. Letting her go transforms reunion from fantasy into evaluation, and only evaluation protects you from repeating the same cycle. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Because silence is not an enemy to defeat, it is a teacher to listen to. Let her, because growth does not come from clinging to what left, but from building what remains. Let her, because the man who emerges on the other side, centered, disciplined, unafraid of absence, is not someone who can be controlled by silence. Ever again. There's a stage in long no contact where the emotional noise finally quiets enough for you to hear something deeper than pain. Your own standards resurfacing. For the first time in months, maybe years, you start asking not how to be chosen, but what kind of connection you are willing to participate in. This is where men reclaim discernment. You realize that access without effort is not intimacy. Silence without explanation is not respect. And waiting without reciprocity is not loyalty. Letting her go means allowing those standards to rise again, instead of suppressing them to preserve hope. Men often underestimate how much extended silence rewires the brain when it's handled correctly. At first, your mind looks outward, searching for signs, updates, proof of relevance. But as you let go, attention turns inward. You begin to notice patterns you ignored, how often you compromised boundaries, how quickly you rationalized distance, how frequently you blamed yourself for dynamics you didn't create. Letting her go is not forgetting. It's integrating those lessons so you don't repeat them under a different name. There is also a critical emotional shift that happens when you stop checking whether you still matter. The question dissolves, and in its place appears a more powerful one. What am I building? That will matter, regardless of who stays. This is the moment a man stops orienting his work around reaction and starts anchoring it in creation. Creation replaces rumination, movement replaces memory, and the past loosens its grip because the future has something solid to attach to extended. No contact reveals a truth men rarely admit. Being wanted is intoxicating, but being needed is exhausting. When you let her go, you step out of the need to be emotionally necessary. You stop trying to rescue, reassure, or reinsert yourself. And that release restores balance, not just in romance, but in how you show up everywhere. You become less reactive, less eager to please, more selective with your energy, and selectivity is a form of self-respect. Men who truly let go during long, no contact often experience a quiet grief. Not for the woman, but for the version of themselves that waited, hoped, and endured longer than they should have. That grief is not weakness, it's maturity, arriving late. But honestly, letting her go includes forgiving yourself for staying too long in emotional uncertainty. It means acknowledging you did the best you could with the awareness you had and choosing not to repeat the pattern now that you know better. Silence also teaches a man how to stand alone without hardening. There is a risk here. Some men turn detachment into armor. They confuse boundaries with bitterness. But letting her go properly doesn't close the heart. It clarifies it. You remain open, but no longer exposed. You remain capable of connection, but no longer dependent on it. That balance, open yet anchored, is where masculine calm lives. When you stop waiting, time stops being an enemy. It becomes an ally. Days regain structure. Weeks regain momentum. Your body relaxes because it no longer has to brace for emotional interruption. And that calm state is not passive. It is powerful. A man who is calm without numbness, focused without rigidity, and detached without resentment becomes difficult to destabilize. Silence loses its power over him entirely, if she ever watches from a distance, and many do. What she notices is not how much you changed, but how little you need to announce it. There is no performance, no indirect messaging, no attempts to signal progress. Letting her go means living well without witnesses, and living well without witnesses is one of the strongest expressions of internal alignment a man can have. Men often think closure will come as a feeling. In reality, closure comes as a decision repeated daily. The decision to not reach out, the decision to not check, the decision to not reopen doors that close themselves. Letting her go is not one dramatic moment, it's quiet consistency. And consistency is what rebuilds self-trust faster than any emotional release ever could. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Because the man who learns to stand steady in silence will never again be ruled by it. Let her. Because absence is only painful when you abandon yourself inside it. Let her, because this chapter was never meant to teach you how to hold on. It was meant to teach you how to let go without losing who you are. There is a final layer of detachment that only appears after the mind stops bargaining and the heart stops rehearsing reunions. And it's here that a man realizes the silence was never about her at all. It was about him learning to stop negotiating with reality. Extended no contact exposes how often men try to renegotiate outcomes long after decisions have been made, clinging to the illusion that effort can reverse time. Letting her go means accepting that some doors don't need to be slammed shut. They close on their own when alignment ends. And accepting that without resentment is not weakness, it's mastery. Men often ask whether letting her go means erasing the past or pretending the connection didn't matter. It doesn't. It means honoring what existed without being enslaved by it. Memory does not require maintenance through pain. Letting her go means allowing the past to be complete, not keeping it alive through longing. Completion is a choice, and once chosen, it frees energy that was trapped in rumination and returns it to the present, where real power lives. Extended no contact also teaches a man how to regulate emotion without suppression. You feel the waves without drowning in them. You acknowledge the ache without turning it into identity. You experience longing without obeying it. This is emotional adulthood, feeling fully without acting compulsively. Letting her go means learning that emotions are signals, not commands. And once you internalize that, you stop being ruled by temporary states. There is a point where silence stops feeling personal. You stop interpreting it as judgment, rejection, or proof of inadequacy. It becomes neutral, just a fact. And neutrality is liberation. Letting her go transforms silence from an accusation into a boundary that was drawn. Boundaries don't insult you, they inform you. And informed, men don't argue with information, they adapt. Men who navigate long no contact with integrity often develop a deeper respect for themselves than they ever had during the relationship, because they learn they can survive emotional deprivation without self-betrayal. They learn they don't need to chase explanations to feel whole. They learn that their value does not rise and fall with responsiveness. That lesson, once learned, changes every future interaction. You no longer plead for reciprocity, you require it. Letting her go also ends the habit of emotional projection. You stop assigning motives, imagining reasons, constructing stories to make the silence tolerable. You accept what you know and release what you don't. And releasing the unknown is powerful, because the unknown is where anxiety breeds certainty. Even painful certainty is calmer than endless speculation. Letting her go collapses the speculation loop and restores mental clarity. Many men discover that once they truly let go, the desire to check, to reach out, to reopen communication fades, naturally, not because they force discipline, but because the emotional hook dissolved. That dissolution is the mark of real detachment. It's not loud, It's quiet, and it feels like standing on solid ground after months at sea. If she never returns, the man who let go will not frame his life around loss. He will frame it around growth that occurred because loss removed distractions. He will see the silence not as wasted time, but as the period where his standards sharpened, his discipline deepened, and his dependence dissolved. Letting her go converts absence into development instead of damage. And if she does return, the man who let go will not be intoxicated by relief. He will not rush to restore old dynamics. He will engage slowly, from strength with awareness. He will ask himself whether the conditions that led to no contact have changed, not whether his longing has. That distinction protects him from repeating cycles and honors the growth he earned during the silence. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her. Because silence is not a verdict on your worth, but a classroom for your character. Let her. Because clinging teaches dependence, while release teaches sovereignty. Let her. Because the man who can remain steady without answers is a man who can build a future without begging permission. And once you learn that silence loses its sting forever. By the time you reach this stage of prolonged no contact, something fundamental has changed inside you. Not loudly, not dramatically, but structurally. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to someone who chose absence. You no longer feel compelled to justify your worth through availability. And this is where men finally understand that dignity is not something you demand from others. It's something you maintain internally, regardless of how you're treated. Letting her go means refusing to audition for relevance in someone else's life while neglecting your own. One of the deepest lessons silence teaches is that connection without reciprocity is not connection. It's self-abandonment. During no contact, the fantasy dissolves. That effort alone can restore alignment. You see clearly that love cannot be carried by one person indefinitely. Letting her go is the moment you stop mistaking endurance for devotion. Devotion that requires self-erasure is not noble, it's destructive. Men often fear that letting go means becoming cold or detached from future relationships. But the opposite is true. When you release properly, you don't become guarded, you become selective. You no longer give access to people who are unsure about you. You no longer romanticize inconsistency. You no longer chase clarity from confusion. Letting her go sharpens your standards without closing your heart. Extended. No contact also dismantles the illusion that love should be proven through suffering. Many men believe that if they hurt enough, wait long enough, endure silently enough, something will be rewarded in the end. But love is not a test of pain, tolerance. Letting her go means rejecting the belief that suffering earns loyalty. It means choosing relationships where presence is mutual, not rationed. There is a quiet authority that emerges when you stop explaining yourself to silence. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. You stop preparing speeches for someone who opted out, and that reclaimed mental space becomes fuel for clarity, ambition, direction. Letting her go frees bandwidth you didn't realize was being consumed by emotional noise. At this point, the question, "What if she comes back?" loses its grip, not because it's impossible, but because it's no longer central. Your life no longer waits at the edge of that possibility. You move forward regardless, and that independence is not indifference, it's alignment. Letting her go means your future is no longer conditional on someone else's readiness. Men who complete this process don't become louder, more performative, or more defensive. They become quieter, more deliberate, less reactive. They listen more closely to behavior than words. They trust patterns over promises, and this shift is irreversible. Once you see how silence reveals truth, you stop chasing explanations entirely. If she ever re-enters your life after months of no contact, the man you are now will not be the man she left. Not because you tried to transform, but because you stopped bleeding energy into waiting. You reclaimed your center, and from that center, you can choose connection without desperation, intimacy without illusion, and commitment without self-loss. And if she never returns, the ending will not feel like abandonment. It will feel like alignment correcting itself. You will recognize that not every bond is meant to last, and not every departure is a failure. Some exits exist to force growth. Some silences exist to wake you up. Letting her go allows that growth to complete instead of stalling in resentment. So if she's doing no contact for months, let her, not as a tactic, not as a test, not as a performance. Let her because your life deserves motion, not suspension. Let her because the man who can stand steady in silence has nothing left to prove. And when you finally stop chasing presence from absence, you don't just heal from her. You step into a version of yourself that will never again be ruled by silence.